Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started, and people can get caught up as they trickle in. Aloha, everyone. Welcome to the South Kohala Coastal Partnership Speaker Series. Just wanted to make a note that we are recording this presentation. My name is Blair Langston. I'm with the Nature Conservancy. Before I introduce our speaker today, I'd like to give a quick introduction to the South Kohala Coastal Partnership so you can get a glimpse of our big picture work and see how our presenters' work today fits within the context of the entire network. So to start, we might ask, why South Kohala? We are on Hawaii Island, the biggest island. Why would we focus on the South Kohala region? Well, in 2010, this region was designated by the Division of Aquatic Resources Hawaii Coral Reefs Strategy Group as a priority area. So this means that South Kohala was identified as an area with substantial and important coral reefs that were also under threat from anthropogenic stressors, including things like sediment, sewage, and unsustainable fisheries, and vulnerable to climate change. So the state saw an opportunity to make progress on these issues that were very complicated and cross-cutting by building a network of partners that could tackle these things together under one geography. So this brings us to the model of the South Kohala Coastal Partnership. So a lot of folks are familiar with watershed partnerships that exist across the state. And in this model, major landowners collaborate to preserve and protect forests and habitats across watershed boundaries. But when we think of applying that type of model to the ocean, it doesn't quite work the same, since we don't have the same ownership structure in the ocean. So instead, we work with stakeholders. So this includes entities such as community groups, government agencies, nonprofits, other various organizations, businesses, researchers, resource managers, and of course, landowners. And at the last count, the partnership had a total of 71 partner organizations involved in our network. So the vision of the South Kohala Coastal Partnership is a restored, healthy, abundant, resilient South Kohala coastal system cared for and cherished by an island community guided by the values and traditions of South Kohala. Prioritizing action. So the network has gone through an iterative planning process to prioritize our actions in our efforts to address impacts to coastal waters. So in the most recent plan, our 2030 South Kohala Coastal Action Plan, we have identified 6 key strategies to focus on. So these 6 strategies are resilient ocean policy aimed to support community-based fisheries management, soil and watershed management, whose objective is to reduce erosion and sedimentation that washes down onto South Kohala's reefs. We have a clean water management strategy that looks to address pollution like sewage, fertilizer, and other types of contaminants and things that come through groundwater. County and community planning. So we work closely with Hawaii County's planning department to provide science that could inform planning efforts. Community connectivity and stewardship strategy, which aims to preserve and enhance the community's connection to place in South Kohala and foster community stewardship and partnerships. And finally, a kind of over-encompassing climate threat assessment and response strategy. This aims to continue to track the latest research on climate change in the area and impacts accordingly. So the structure of this network is formatted. So each of these 6 strategies has a team, and we communicate across the network in a couple ways. So this speaker series is one of the ways that we do that. And what I mean is that with a network of over 70 partners, it can be challenging to communicate all the details effectively to one another simultaneously. So with that, we started the speaker series in summer 2021, and we are continuing the speaker series to connect the work of our partners with each other, with the community, and across the network, so that we can take a deeper dive on our partners and their work. So before we get started today, just a quick, a few housekeeping requests. Please keep yourself on mute during the talk. We'll open it up for discussion afterwards. We should have a good chunk of time for discussion after the talk. Feel free to type things in the chat, and I will try to keep track of them to bring up after the presentation. And please remember to be respectful of all participants during the discussion and the presentation. If you're able to turn on your camera when you have a question, we would love to see your face if your internet allows for that. And again, of course, we are recording the presentation to share on our website after today, so we can share with participants who aren't able to make it today. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to Chris Teague, who is with the Division of Aquatic Resources, to share his presentation today. And with that, Chris, I will just pass it over to you.
Excellent. Thanks, Blair. Yeah, I'm really glad to be here and glad that the South Kohala Coastal Partnership exists. I think it's a really great way to get sort of everybody on the same page and working together. I think resource management, especially here, is really an all hands on deck sort of a thing. So yeah, we need groups like this to exist to effectively manage our nearshore resources. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. So today, I really want to talk about the coral reefs of Hawaii and how we can really work together like this partnership to protect these reefs now and into the future. I'll start off by giving a bit of context for what the Division of Aquatic Resources is, sort of who we are, what our kuleana is. Then I'll give a little bit of a primer on coral reefs, especially in Hawaii, talk about their importance and the threats that they face. Then I want to talk a little bit about how marine ecologists and managers have really begun to reframe this issue of nearshore reef management. And then finally, I'll talk about how we at DAR plan to meet all of our goals for coral reefs through the Holomua 30 by 30 initiative and other upcoming programs. So we at DAR are a division within the Department of Land and Natural Resources. Our mission statement is to work with the people of Hawaii to manage, conserve, and restore the state's unique aquatic resources and ecosystems for present and future generations. So what do we mean when we talk about aquatic resources in this way? Really, we're talking about all aquatic and marine habitats within the state. So that includes streams, estuaries, ancholine pools, and coral reef ecosystems, to name a few. But it also means that we're thinking about all the species that reside there. So the fishes, the coral, limu, invertebrates, plants, all that kind of falls under our jurisdiction and our focus. But unfortunately, we can't be everywhere all at once. We can't cover every species that needs our help. So we have to sort of prioritize our work. So really, we focus on those issues and those species that are important ecologically, those that are important for subsistence fishing, for cultural value, and for commercial ventures. Yeah, that's what we focus on primarily. And so how do we really fulfill our mission? We have a huge range of activities that take place across the state. So from issuing fishing licenses and permits to dealing with stocked fishing areas, fishing access points, marine debris removal, all sorts of different things. Some of these tasks are led by specific people in our main Oahu office, but really Hawaii is a very diverse place and we can't manage everything effectively just solely from Oahu. And that's where our district offices come in. So we have various district offices. We have two on this island here in Kona, as well as in Hilo. We have one on Kauai, one on Maui, And then we have multiple offices on Oahu. So those of us working in these district offices, we play a role in a lot of these different tasks, different issues at a local scale. But then since we're here in these local areas, we're able to tailor our work to the specific needs of each place. So here in West Hawaii, we're responsible for the entire west coast of the Big Island. That's from Upolu Point in the north down to Kauai in the south. And since Kona side generally stays pretty dry, earlier this week notwithstanding, we don't really have nearly as many freshwater resources as other districts do. Think like Hilo or Kauai have a lot more stream ecosystems than we do. So that, coupled with the fact that we have some of the most amazing reefs in the state and I think in the world, means we really focus heavily on coral ecosystems here in West Hawaii. So I put this question up here, why do we care about coral reefs? I think it seems like a bit of a silly question. Even people that live far away from here can say a number of different things about why we should protect coral reefs. But I think it's really important to mention it still. The services that are provided by coral reefs are incredibly wide-reaching, and we need to recognize this as we think about different ways to manage reefs. Really, the values that are placed on coral reefs vary from person to person, and we need to be mindful of all these values if we're going to build this sort of a big coalition of support looking to protect these reefs. So first and foremost, corals provide really crucial habitat space on a reef. There's a term in ecology called habitat heterogeneity, which effectively means that the more varied the habitat is, the more species that can be supported. Now, there are abiotic processes that can give some level of variation in habitat. So you can think of like basalt flats to vertical walls to boulder fields. But really, corals take this to the next level. They build upon that abiotic complexity to make this hugely diverse range of different habitat types. So the different morphologies, growth rates, lifespans of different coral species, even on a single reef, can lead to this complex interconnected web of nooks and crannies and hidey holes that all these fishes, invertebrates, and other forms of life can call home. So there's also a big role of corals within the food web. Corals themselves are prey items for a number of reef organisms, like this butterfly fish and others of that family. Range of other fishes and invertebrates all feed on corals. And then dead or damaged coral material is also readily colonized by algae, which then can feed Hawaii's many herbivorous fishes and invertebrates, like all the big school of yellow tang feeding here. I think this was down at KA maybe. Of course, coral reef ecosystems play a pretty massive role in how we feed ourselves as well. Coral reefs are an important piece of Hawaii's fishing history, and they continue to be key sources of food for many people in Hawaii. One study estimated that nearshore fisheries provide nearly 8 million meals each year, and that's just in Hawaii alone. And even fisheries that we don't readily associate with coral reefs, like the tuna fisheries, they really still rely on coral reef ecosystems. Many of these pelagic fishes actively feed on organisms that originate in coral reefs. So this next one isn't quite as apparent in West Hawaii, given our steeply sloping seafloor and the direction that our coastline faces, sort of our protection from big swell events. But reefs are hugely important in protecting shorelines from wave damage and storm surge. Healthy reefs are able to substantially dissipate incoming wave energy so that once the water does reach the shoreline, it does a lot less damage than it would otherwise. Then sort of a less tangible but not less important aspect of coral reefs is that they're really closely tied to the past, present, and future of Hawaii. Corals and other reef-dwelling organisms are featured heavily in the Kumulipo, and people have been gathering from the reef for generations. And reefs today, they remain a source of food, enjoyment, connection to nature, and employment for many of the people of Hawaii. And lastly, there's this really inherent intrinsic value to coral reefs. These are biodiversity and biomass hotspots, which lends to their incredible natural beauty. Many of Hawaii's reefs are also readily accessible, which makes them a great gateway for people to interact with the natural world. This unique and accessible beauty is a really powerful reason for us to want to protect Hawaii's reefs in the same way that we've protected Yellowstone, the California redwoods, and the Grand Canyon. Unfortunately, as we're all very well aware, there are a multitude of factors that are threatening the health of coral reefs. Anthropogenic climate change is causing mass bleaching events and increased storm severity. Unsustainable fishing practices are reducing fish and invertebrate populations on the reefs. Excessive nutrient loads from land-based sources of pollution can bolster algal cover, which can smother corals. And reef habitats are in danger from physical damage due to anchoring, overuse by humans, and ocean acidification. So given all these varied threats, how do we go about actively managing reefs and ensuring their health into the future? So one sort of takeaway from the past several decades of work in marine ecology and marine management is that marine ecosystems are much more complex than we once considered them. The threats that I just listed affect a lot more than just a single species or a single fishery. So with that, we really need to move beyond this sort of single species approach that fisheries managers have used in the past. Those models are still super important. They have a role within our broader management ideals, but they by themselves present sort of an incomplete picture. So more recently, and by that I mean in the past couple decades, ecologists have been really talking about this idea of ecosystem-based management. And we're seeing a sort of a major shift towards ecosystem-based management, or EBM, in the marine realm, kind of at all levels of management. Basically, EBM is a regime that looks at a system holistically. So it takes into account the full range of species, life stages, interactions, and influences, including those activities that we humans are doing. All of it is kind of this interconnected milieu that's all important for reef management. One important tool within this EBM toolbox is the idea of marine spatial planning, or place-based planning. So by shifting focus to a specific place rather than a specific activity, we can bring together a much broader range of users and focus on all the varied interactions that come with that. Clearly, the issues that coral reefs face in West Hawaii are very different from those faced in East Hawaii and much different from, say, Oahu. And so marine spatial planning really allows us to tailor our management activities to the specific needs of each place. Now, given that, management decisions can really range from allowing most activities while prohibiting a few select types of extraction to full no-take zones. This also isn't tied just to fisheries. Marine spatial planning can also focus on other things like offshore energy, shoreline development, tourism, etc. And finally, we can think of place-based planning not just at a single scale, but at a range of different spatial scales. So we can consider it from the statewide level to island, to moku, to single ahupua'as and within them. So as I said, marine spatial planning can really mean a lot of different things. So for now, I want to narrow our focus really just to deal with nearshore fisheries, and specifically the idea of marine protected areas, or MPAs. Now, there's a pretty huge range of acronyms here that all tend to mean a similar thing. So MPAs, MMAs, MLCDs, FMAs, all of these are generally an area where some type of take is prohibited, not necessarily full no-take zones. So regardless of the term, this is definitely a hot button issue when we talk about marine management. I've often heard this idea that closing off certain areas to any level of fishing, that's not management. You gotta focus more on bag limits and things like that. But really, this idea that it's not management is sort of based in that earlier style of single species management. In reality, MPAs have emerged as an extremely important tool for both marine conservation and fisheries enhancement. So this is a little bit dated, but the booklet, or the image on the right, shows this booklet that's put out by a group called the Partnership for Interdisciplinary Study of Coastal Oceans. They're based in California, but the researchers who are part of this group work in a bunch of different areas, from California to the South Pacific to various places around the world. And they put out this booklet to really detail the effectiveness of marine reserves. There's a lot of great info in it, some of which I'll talk about in a minute. But if you're interested in it, I'm happy to share a link or share a copy of it to whoever. So worldwide, MPAs have been shown to be highly successful. So a few examples of this: in Palau, a network of partial and no-take marine protected areas ended up leading to a 2-fold increase in resource fish biomass, as well as a 5-fold increase in the biomass of highly targeted piscivorous fishes. So these are fishes that eat other fishes. In Kenya in the 1990s, a no-take marine reserve was formed, and then at the same time, a partial take MPA was created in Tanzania, right next door. Both of these protected areas had higher average biomass and diversity than the fully open areas, but the full no-take zone did show the greatest gains. A network of mostly no-take marine protected areas in Southern California in the Channel Islands showed a greater biomass of species targeted by fishing inside of protected areas compared to outside, and the biomass of these targeted species were increasing at a rate about 4 times faster inside the MPAs compared with outside. And then right here in West Hawaii, total fish density, biomass, adult fish length, species richness, and herbivore biomass have all shown to be consistently higher within MPAs compared with open areas. And here, when I talk about MPAs, these include a mix of a couple full no-take areas, a handful of partial take areas, and spots where aquarium collection has been prohibited for a long period of time. Now, one criticism that arises when we talk about MPAs is that fishers will just move to open areas, which will lead to no real net gain from the placement of those MPAs. But there have been several studies, some pretty recently, that have shown results to the contrary. So that same study that I talked about in the Channel Islands in Southern California showed that biomass also increased outside of the MPAs, indicating that movement of the fisheries had little effect. Another Southern California study indicated that lobster catch increased by 225% just 6 years after 1/3 of the fished area was enclosed within MPAs. And then again, in West Hawaii, 2 surgeonfish species that were historically targeted by aquarium fishers have broadly increased in density in areas both closed and open to collection. So that's what you see in these 2 plots here on the right. So the final point that I want to bring up here is the idea of a coherent network of MPAs. If MPAs are designed in a network where separate MPAs have similar rules and are spaced effectively, then the conservation gains are much greater than MPAs that are not designed to work together. A study that looked into this in 2014 compared West Hawaii's network of MPAs with Maui's non-linked set of MPAs, and it turned out that the gains were much greater within the network, in the West Hawaii network, than the Maui non-network. So with all these ideas in mind, when the IUCN convened in Hawaii in 2016, they called for 30% of all marine habitats worldwide to be set aside in highly protected MPAs. The end goal for this was for 30% of the ocean to be completely protected from extractive activities. But the caveat to this is there's an allowance for the gathering rights of indigenous peoples and local communities. That same year, Governor Teague announced the Sustainable Hawaii Initiative, which includes a goal of effectively managing 30% of nearshore waters by the year 2030. So with that, our team at DAR kind of took these initiatives as a big call to action. We have an awesome team within DAR, some of them are on here today, that's been putting together this program and doing a lot of great work with that. So early next year, we're planning to do a big official rollout of the plan and what we envision for the next several years. But today I'll try to outline some of the broad strokes of this overall plan. So the 30 by 30 team have outlined four main pillars of our goal to effectively manage 30% of nearshore waters. These include place-based planning, Pono practices, protection and restoration, and monitoring. So I'll go through each of these piece by piece. So of course, a huge portion of this overall initiative is that 30% target. And we've sort of switched our terms and we tend to use the term marine managed areas or MMAs. Essentially, this is the same as how I've been using the term MPA throughout this talk. It's really any area that has additional protections associated with them. So for this goal, we will be working very closely with local communities and fishers and other stakeholders to design really cohesive networks of these MMAs within each district in Hawaii. And we're also going to be working closely with research partners to ensure that these network designs are able to meet all of our big ecological goals. Here in West Hawaii, we kind of have a bit of a head start over other islands. Currently, about 35% of the coastline is offered some level of protection. Most of this area is within what are called fish replenishment areas. So these are areas where aquarium collection is prohibited. But we really want to build on this and add to it in order to meet our goal of effective management. As we start to kind of put together these network designs with communities, we could potentially use these areas as a starting point and simply change the rules within these existing boundaries to make them more closely aligned with our goals. Or we could shift or create or delete boundaries as necessary if that helps us meet our community goals and forms a more ideal network. So I want to be clear here that this doesn't mean closing off 30% of the coastline to all fishing. That's something that comes up often with this idea of 30 by 30, that we're just going to close off 30% of all of Hawaii's waters to fishing. That's not the case. We're looking to effectively manage 30% of the coastline, which means some blend of other protections, some no-take areas, some partial take. That said, though, I'd love to see a portion of West Hawaii's 30% be turned into permanent no-take reserves if we can find a way to fit that in. Currently, we only have 2 full no-take areas. That's portions of the Lapakahi State or Marine Life Conservation District and the Kealakekua Bay Marine Life Conservation District. So when the FRA system was put into place in the late 90s, the legislature actually called for the eventual designation of some of these FRAs to be set aside as no-take areas, but we just this was just never implemented after that. So this is sort of our next chance to meet that goal. Now, we understand that while an MMA network can get us a long way, we still need to combine that with state and district-wide rules that promote good fishing practices. And that's what we're really pursuing now with our proposed herbivore rules that focus on Kohala, Uhu, Manini, and Kole. And if you're interested in learning more about this and giving some feedback, we're going to be having a number of different scoping sessions statewide, starting actually this Saturday with 3 different sessions. I can talk about those later on and put some of those dates in the chat. And then in the future, we're going to look at further aligning our regulations with Pono fishing practices for a range of other species as well. So Herbivore rules are one stage in this process, but we want to make sure that we're doing this for many species. We also want to support doe care and Makai Watch on enforcement activities and increase our education and outreach efforts in order to really spread the word about best fishing practices. Then with all the varied threats to coral reef ecosystems, sometimes we need to kind of take a more active role in restoration and enhancement. So this covers a broad range of activities, some of which we're already doing, others that we hope to expand on. So one is our coral nursery on Oahu. We want to continue work on that and expand there in order to help rebuild resilient reefs. We can also continue our work in bolstering native sea urchin populations in order to help control invasive algae. And we want to work with a range of partners to minimize issues of land-based sources of pollution and watershed concerns. So many of these problems go pretty far beyond our capacity within DAR. So we really plan to work with trusted partners and community groups to kind of meet many of these goals. Then finally, we need an active and extensive monitoring program in order to ensure that our efforts are meeting our stated goals. So monitoring can really play a number of important roles. First of all, it gives us a snapshot of current reef ecosystem health. It also allows us to see how populations and reef communities are responding to our management actions. And then it's a key tool for early detection of reef health issues. So things like coral bleaching and disease and population blooms. If we have early detection for these things, then we can better take proper mitigating action. You might have heard about this, but in 2013, on the west coast of the mainland, there was this disease that went through and was affecting sea stars. That disease was first spotted by people that were doing active monitoring, long-term monitoring research in Southern California, and that early detection allowed researchers to plan for it and start to monitor this as it spread throughout the whole West Coast. So similarly here, if we're doing active monitoring, we can see these things early and take steps to slow it down early on. So again, this sort of active monitoring takes a huge amount of time and effort. So we really rely on partnerships like the Nature Conservancy and other partners to help minimize any of these data gaps that can arise. So that's really the basics for the statewide initiative. Like I said, we'll be coming out with more information early next year once we start this full rollout and kick off some of these exciting new partnerships. But then what about here in West Hawaii? How are we focusing on this sort of idea of ecosystem-based management here specifically? So historically, our office has primarily focused on the aquarium trade, and there's some good reasons for that. So concerns about overfishing and conflict starting in the 1970s led to the establishment of our full fish replenishment area network and other aquarium-specific rules. And our monitoring program that was started in the late 90s was designed specifically to track our management actions for this fishery. But that really meant that we're targeting specific reef types and depth ranges, specifically those within the sort of 30 to 60 foot depth range. But clearly there are many other habitats, other species, and other concerns that we need to focus on in addition to this fishery. So we want to look to expanding the scope and scale of our monitoring. So our team has been working on developing additional survey methods that will allow us to better monitor a wide range of depths and reef types. We're also updating our methods for monitoring corals and other forms of benthic cover. We're using newer, more efficient programs like CoralNet to analyze seafloor images and track coral and algal cover. Then the really exciting new development for our office is that we're working on this process of 3D reef modeling using a system called Structure from Motion. What this does is it stitches together a lot of individual photos of a reef to recreate this three-dimensional map of a seafloor. That can let us take some really interesting new approaches, like in measuring individual coral colonies or tracking to track their growth, or precisely calculating how structurally complex a reef is. So pretty cool, interesting stuff. Then unfortunately, we've had a number of incidents of coral damage lately due to improper anchoring and illegal moorings. You might recall a pretty big one several years back in Kailua Bay. Sad to say that we've had 2 more anchor incidents like that just this year, and we've removed multiple illegal moorings that were placed right on top of live coral. So one goal of mine is to utilize some pretty cool new coral maps that have come out from Arizona State University. I want to use them to create clear maps showing where it's okay to anchor and where it isn't. And hopefully we can work with NOAA, with the Division of Boating, and particular companies to help spread the word on safe anchoring practices. Lastly, we're hoping to get some funds from the federal government here pretty soon to kickstart some coral restoration work here in West Hawaii. Coral restoration is still extremely new. It's a nascent field in Hawaii. So we need to just start by figuring out what works well and what doesn't. So our first steps will be to simply glue down coral fragments and try to understand what the factors are that are important for survival. Then eventually we want to have a facility on island where we can help rehabilitate corals that have been damaged. And finally, we want to work on some larger scale restoration efforts by partnering with researchers, NGOs, and local communities. So to recap, our coral reefs are extremely important and unique places, but they face a wide range of threats. In order to protect them, we need to think holistically and work closely with all who rely on the ocean. My goal is to continue to implement these ideas both at the local and statewide level in order to help ensure that our reefs are healthy for years and generations to come. Thank you very much. I can open it up to questions now, and if you'd like to contact me after the talk, I put my email address up there. I'll just leave that up for a moment.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. I love all those underwater photos. It is really nice considering we're all in the office right now. But yeah, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Chris? The floor is open to discussion. Also, feel free to paste anything in the chat.
Chris, sorry, I was trying to get your email down and was trying to open up documents. Would you mind putting your email in the chat?
Yep, will do.
Thank you so much.
I have a question, Chris, for DAR's outreach. What are your guys' strategies? Like, who is your intended audience, and what are your outreach methods?
So it really depends on which sort of outreach we're talking about. We have an education and outreach staff that's headed up by our Oahu office, but we have people on island as well. Excuse me, that are going around and talking to students in classes, as well as talking with fishers, meeting people at boat ramps, all range of things. So many of you might know Uncle John Kahiapo. He's our main I&E guy on island, and he's amazing. He's always going around to different shops and giving talks in schools, that sort of thing.
That's awesome.
And then we do try to do other outreach events, like we've partnered with state parks a couple times and tabled alongside them to kind of get the word out for specific things. I think most recently when a reef safe sunscreen dispenser went up in Wailea Bay, a few staff members from our office were there to chat with people about coral reefs.
Yes, Paka?
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. Chris, I am curious to know if there has been an effort to tie the work that is being done by DAR around reefs to the state's commitments for climate action and for reducing emissions and all of those things. We know that there is a relationship between the carbon sequestration that happens with reef ecosystems and everything like that. And I'm just trying to think of ways that you all could be supported better, and ultimately more of these things could happen at larger scales and be recognized as integral parts of the state's goals, or of, you know, ultimately the planet's goals. I'm just curious if there's efforts that are happening right now in terms of you know, emissions and everything like that that is always talked about, because I feel like solar panels and everything are so sexy and everyone's like, oh my gosh, and we always forget about how important these ecosystems are.
Right. Yeah, I love that. Like it's there's so many different sort of facets and approaches that we need to take for this, that it's hard to link every single piece to it. But I think when we're talking about reef health and reef management, the idea of these global global level concerns are kind of always on our mind. That's what we realize is the primary driver of issues like coral bleaching. It's all very much driven by climate change. So that's always sort of our basis for a lot of our management efforts. And things like the Sustainable Hawaii Initiative that Teague proposed and pushed forward several years ago, that really was a way to blend a lot of these different ideas. So sort of Malkadam Makai issues, broader resource use goals, and sustainable energy production. Sorry, did that answer your question?
Yeah. So it sounds like the Sustainable Hawaii Initiative is pretty much right now the vessel in terms of achieving a lot of the goals.
Yeah, that's the primary way that we do that. But yeah, if there are ways that we can interact more directly with these groups, I'd love to do that. It's like Jamie has a question.
Yeah, Chris, great talk. Thanks for that update. You mentioned this a couple of times, and I guess I just kind of want to bring it up and get your thoughts more deeply, is that there's a lot of things happening on reefs. Many of them are land-based, right? And so if in the 30 by 30 goal, you know, DAR's purview is very much ocean-based, right? So it seems like there's a potential disconnect between the ability to realize those conservation and management goals that DAR is trying to set because of the sort of lack of be able to manage holistically or from an ecosystem-based approach. So I was wondering, like, you know, to what extent do you feel like DAR is able to engage with, you know, sort of DLNR in general, and to the extent that there might be a coordination among agencies within DLNR to try and, you know, mitigate the impacts of land-based sources of pollution, whether it's wastewater, whether it's sediment, and so that, you know, those goals that you guys are setting can actually be realized.
Totally, yeah, that's a very good point. And I think in the past there's been a lot of criticism laid at DAR about this very thing, like not really. Well, I think for DLNR in general, not working together as a single unit. And I think that's something that we all very much want to change. We want to work very closely with DOFA and Department of Health in particular for a lot of these sort of land-based pollution issues. And yeah, I know as we ramp up the 30 by 30 effort, it's going to be in conjunction with land groups in order to like try to designate these areas that where we can do stuff in the water that in areas that also has a lot of work going on Malco there, so that we can kind of have this full suite of action. That's definitely a big goal of ours, and yeah, hopefully we can work together with those folks to make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of an unfair question because this is happening at levels that are far above our pay grades, right? And I think there's a lot of work going on at our level that I think is highlighting these interactions. I don't know how you propagate that through the government bureaucracy to ensure, and it's not just you, like the United States 30 by 30 goal, like currently there is a disconnect between oceans and land, and even sort of the United Nations 30 by 30 goals aren't necessarily explicit about tying those the way that I think they should be. So
yeah,
I just see this as a potential major problem that it'd be great for us to figure out a way to reconcile it.
I think
one way to deal with it is just we don't necessarily wait for the higher ups to make those decisions, and we just start going after it. Like by people at our level working with our equivalent people in those other divisions, I think we can get a lot of work done just with that as a starting point, and then the issues at the higher levels can work themselves out accordingly. Sorry, I interrupted you, Blair.
No, it's okay. I can jump in here a little bit. I would say that part of what Jameson is speaking to, I think, and I know DAR is a statewide entity, but in terms of South Kohala, that's something that the South Kohala Coastal Partnership is really good at addressing. Within our coastal action plan, we have, Chris is part of just one strategy, the Resilient Ocean policy strategy, but we have other strategies such as soil and watershed management. And since the partnership, DAR was, an integral organization in initiating the partnership to begin with. And, it's situated in South Kohala because it's designated as a priority area. So, I would kind of say that DAR and DLNR are thinking about that in terms of, prioritizing South Kohala as an area to think of Mauka and Makai issues holistically together. Maybe not the partnership is really focused on South Kohala, but I think that was strategic. And Julia, feel free to elaborate or correct me.
Yeah, no, you bring up a great point. No, the partnership exists exactly because of this reason, right? Because DAR and NOAA recognize that land-based sources of pollution are a major driver of reef decline. And so that's the whole goal, is to work in a cross-cutting way across agencies and organizations to make changes at all of those levels. So yes, it's happening in the focus areas in the state, but let's think about how we start to expand that. And I think bringing up the working just across state agencies is something that we should give more attention to, not just in South Kohala. I think Luna has his hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to jump into this conversation. So the one thing I was thinking of, Chris, was kind of how, and this is something important, but Miloli'i took the initiative themselves and reached out to DOFA and was like, yeah, we want to talk to you guys because get some issues with like how the road comes down and what maps do you have and where is your boundary at and what have you guys been seeing? And there was so many questions asked that the community went to them first. And it's now, if DAR comes across and says like, hey, DOFA, like we want to work with you immediately, like perfect, we're already working with the community. So that would be like one of my things that I plant, the seeds that I plant, is like when the community start reaching out to the different division, it allows DAR to be like, oh, hey, we're working on this initiative. And it's like, now DLNR is working together because the community is like, hey, this is important, right? So that's our constituents. And I kind of think of it like government. That's how it works, right? When your constituents are like, hey, there's pilikia, like you're going to be like, oh, how do we help? And so if it's not working at our level at DLNR, the community can also take that first step and be like, hey, DOFA, like we're trying to make rules over here in the ocean, but you guys are right up there and you guys see a lot of people coming down the road, like what? And they just reached out and was just like, they made that relationship. So now it's an easier reach for us to connect with DOFA and be like, hey, like we're partners in this, like let's make sure we're on the same page too. So that was it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks, Luna. Yeah, so I think it can work in all directions, right? It can work from this sort of top sideways approach with DAR directly approaching them to these various bottom up approaches where the communities are really pushing for integration that way.